Today, I want to share a story so intense it will leave you holding your breath. Unfolding under the cold stars of the Old West, where fire, grief, and destiny collide. This is a place where danger rides on horseback, where survival is never promised, and where one decision can pull two worlds into the same storm. It all started with something almost insignificant, a desperate request that quietly shifted the course of many lives. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Acrid smoke scorched Mireya Knox's lungs as she staggered through what was left of her home. Orange flames clawed at the collapsed rafters, hurling sparks into the darkening sky like dying fireflies fighting the night. Her hands, smeared black with soot, shook as she clutched the only thing she had managed to save. A dented tin locket. Inside it rested a faded photograph of Jonah Rook, her husband, taken before sickness hollowed his cheeks and stole his breath 3 months ago. The cabin had been their promise, raised by their own hands on this unforgiving stretch of Texas frontier. Now it was nothing but smoldering ruin. The dry summer had turned every beam into tinder, and one careless spark from a tipped oil lamp had finished the job. She had been reading Jonah's final letter by lamplight when exhaustion dragged her under. She woke to fire devouring the walls. Bare feet burned against scorched earth as she backed away from the blaze. Her nightgown, singed and torn, offered no shelter from the cooling air. The heat had already dried her tears before they could fall, leaving pale streaks on her smoke-stained face. Then she heard it, the thunder of hooves that froze her blood solid. They emerged from the darkness beyond the firelight, silent and sudden, like spirits pulled from her worst fears. Apache riders, their faces marked for war, their horses shifting with restrained power. 6 of them. Maybe 7. Their shapes wavered in smoke and shadow. Firelight flashed across weapons, lances, bows, rifles taken from old battles. Mireya's heart slammed against her ribs. She had heard the whispers in town, seen what remained after Apache raids. The Hartley farm, 20 miles east, had been found abandoned. No bodies, only bloodstains and splintered furniture. The Morrison family had vanished without a trace. Their fate lingered in every settler's nightmares. There was nowhere to flee. Behind her, the burning cabin sealed off escape. Ahead, the riders spread into a half circle, cutting her off from the open prairie. Their horses stamped and snorted, sensing their rider's intent. One man swung down from his saddle with effortless control, the movement of someone born to the horse. He stood taller than the rest, broad-shouldered and still. Authority clung to him like a second skin. Ritual scars marked his face, signs of battles survived, honors earned. His dark eyes reflected the flames as he stepped closer. The knife in his hand caught the firelight, its blade worn smooth from long use. Mireya noticed how naturally his fingers wrapped the hilt. The way Jonah once held his carpenter's tools, steady, familiar. But there would be no building here, only an ending. The other Apache riders stayed mounted, watching with expressions ranging from idle curiosity to cold disregard. One of the younger men spoke in their language. Harsh laughter followed. Mireya didn't need translation to understand. She was prey caught in a snare. The leader stopped just beyond her reach. So close she could see the fine beadwork on his war shirt. The eagle feathers braided into his hair. War paint turned his face into something both striking and terrifying. He smelled of horse sweat, smoke, and open land, sage and windswept grass. Mireya straightened her spine. If this was how she would die, she would not do it on her knees. She had buried her husband with her own hands. She had survived 3 months alone on hostile ground. She would not cheapen that fight by begging now. The warrior lifted his knife. Time slowed. Mireya heard her own heartbeat, felt every strained breath, saw everything with sharp clarity. The scar along his jaw, the copper band circling his arms, the measured rise and fall of his chest. And then the words rose in her, unplanned and undeniable. Maybe it was the memory of Jonah's final kiss through fever-cracked lips. Maybe it was the hollow loneliness that had eaten her alive since his death. Or maybe it was the need to die as she had lived, loved, not forgotten. "If death is waiting for me," she said, her voice steady despite trembling limbs, "then let your kiss come first." The words hung between them, thick as smoke. The warrior froze. His blade stopped midair. His eyes widened just slightly. The first fracture in a warrior's mask. Behind him, the Apache riders fell silent. Even the horses stilled. Only the fire crackled, and somewhere far off, a coyote howled. The leader searched her face as if trying to read a language he did not know. Slowly, the knife lowered until it rested at his side. His free hand lifted, and for one heartbeat, Mireya thought he would strike her. Instead, his fingers hovered near her soot-marked cheek, close enough to feel his warmth, not touching. He spoke a single word in Apache, soft, unreadable. And in that breath of hesitation, everything changed. It might have been a question or a declaration. Mireya Knox could not tell. But something in his voice had changed. The sharp edge of casual violence blunted. One of the mounted Apache riders called out, his tone tight with protest. The leader answered without looking back. His words carried authority. An argument flared. Short, rapid exchanges Mireya could only piece together by bound and posture. Some voices carried disdain, others uncertainty. Through it all, the leader's gaze never left her. In the fading glow of her burning cabin, she thought she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not pity. These people had little patience for that. It was something else, something that crossed the gulf between their worlds. Respect. The dispute ended when the leader snapped a final command. He slid his knife home with deliberate care, then motioned to a younger rider. The man dismounted, reluctant, and pulled a length of rawhide from his saddle. Mireya understood. She would not die tonight. At least, not yet. As the rider stepped closer with the rope, she extended her wrists. Better to keep what dignity she could than be thrown down like a trapped animal. The bindings were firm, but not cruel. The young Apache avoided her eyes as he worked. Whether from shame or revulsion, she could not tell. When it was done, the leader gestured toward his horse, a tall paint stallion, broad and steady. Mireya looked back once at the dying embers behind her. Everything she had built with Jonah Rook, every memory sealed inside those walls, was now ash carried by the wind. The locket pressed against her chest beneath her torn nightgown, her last tie to a life that was ending even as another, uncertain one began. The leader mounted first, then reached down and lifted her with surprising ease. She landed behind him, forced to lean into his back, bound hands making balance a constant struggle. His war shirt scratched her cheek. Beneath it, she felt the coiled strength of a man shaped by survival, by a readiness for violence that never fully slept. As the riders turned and vanished into the dark, Mireya caught the smell of rain on the wind. It would come too late to save her home, but perhaps it would cleanse the land for whatever lay ahead. They rode in formation, the leader at the front with his strange captive. Voices drifted low now, the earlier agitation spent. Mireya sensed she had become something new to them. Not a prize, not a prisoner, but a question they had yet to answer. So they pressed into the wide Texas night, leaving behind the ashes of Mireya Knox's former life, toward a fate as uncertain as the promise hidden in a warrior's pause, the instant when death had waited and something else had stepped forward. The prairie stretched on like a sea of silver grass beneath the moon. She lost track of time, though her body kept count. Thighs rubbed raw by the saddle, wrists burning where rawhide bit into tender skin, her spine aching from holding balance with bound hands. The Apache riders kept a punishing pace, stopping only to water the horses at creeks that appeared like miracles in the emptiness. During these brief halts, Mireya was allowed down. Her legs often failed her, and she collapsed, drawing rough laughter from the younger riders. She learned their names by listening, not birth names, but titles earned through blood and deed. The man with the scarred cheek who took pleasure in her misery was called Rook. The quieter one who would not meet her gaze answered to Naira. And their leader, she heard his name spoken with clear deference, the sounds heavy with meaning she could not yet shape. By the second day, her nightgown had torn in several places, offering little protection. The sun rose like a forge, baking the moisture from her body until her lips split and bled. When she swayed in the saddle, close to falling, the younger riders noticed. Rook rode nearer, his tone mocking, meaning unmistakable. He gestured with his lance, first at Mireya, then at their leader. The question was clear enough. Why does she still live? Why carry this white woman who should have burned with her house? The leader's reply cut the air, sharp and final. The argument died, but tension rippled through the group. Mireya felt it. She was an anomaly, neither slave nor adopted captive, existing in a space that unsettled them all. At midday, heat and exhaustion finally claimed her. The world tilted, darkness crept in from the edges. She felt herself falling and could not stop it. She woke to cool water on her lips, blessed relief from a buffalo bladder canteen. The leader knelt beside her in the shade of a mesquite. His face gave nothing away. The other Apache riders had dismounted at a distance, busying themselves with the horses, careful not to look. "Drink," he said. The English word was rough with accent, but clear. Mireya's eyes widened. She had never expected him to speak her language at all. Mireya drank as if her life depended on it. Water spilled down her chin and soaked her collarbone. He pulled the canteen away before she could make herself sick. "You speak English," she said, breathless. "A little. From traders, from soldiers." His tone was plain, unadorned. Then he studied her with the same careful attention he gave his horse. "You're not strong," he said. "Not like a man. You are a woman." There was no cruelty in it, only fact. Mireya wanted to argue, to say she had survived alone for months, that she had buried Jonah Rook with her own hands and chosen to keep breathing when every part of her had wanted to follow him into the ground. But she swallowed the words. "Why?" she asked instead. "Why didn't you kill me?" He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, each word came carefully, as if he were crossing unfamiliar ground. "You asked for a kiss before death," he said. "Not for life, not for mercy." He paused, searching. That is how a warrior thinks. That is how a warrior's woman thinks. Not how white women think. "I'm not a warrior's woman," Mireya said quietly. I was a carpenter's wife. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, perhaps, or something harder to name. He took a strip of dried meat from his pouch and pressed it into her hands. Eat. We ride. As he turned to leave, Mireya heard herself ask, "What do they call you?" He looked back. For the first time, she saw what might have been the faintest ghost of a smile. "My people call me Ashen." He hesitated, then added, "Traders call me Samuel." The familiar name sounded strange here, out of place, like a bridge between worlds. "I'm Mireya Knox," she said. He nodded once and returned to his riders, leaving her to chew the tough meat and wonder at the shape her fate had taken. They rode through the afternoon and into another night. When they finally stopped, Ashen spread a buffalo robe on the ground near where she crouched. The younger Apache riders watched with open displeasure, but none challenged him. Mireya understood the truth of it. She existed only because of his protection, and that protection rested on something fragile, authority, curiosity, and perhaps something she dared not name. On the third night, the temperature dropped sharply. What remained of her nightgown did nothing against the cutting wind. She curled inward, teeth chattering, clinging to what little warmth her body could make. She slept in broken snatches. When she woke, something heavy lay across her shoulders. A buffalo robe, thick, warm, smelling of smoke and hide. She looked up and saw Ashen standing watch, just beyond the firelight. He did not meet her eyes. He did not move. But she knew. Rook had seen it too. The next morning, Rook rode close enough that his horse's shoulders struck Ashen's paint stallion. His words were sharp, his gestures angry. He pointed at Mireya, then dragged a finger across his throat. Ashen's reply was calm but final. Whatever he said made Rook wheel away in disgust, spitting onto the dirt as he went. Later, Naira, the quiet one, surprised Mireya by riding close on her other side. He studied her for a moment before speaking in broken English. "You bring trouble for him. For all." "I didn't ask for this," Mireya said. "No," Nisra replied slowly, searching for words. "But you are here." He glanced toward Ashen's back. "He is strong warrior, many coups, many honors. But you make warriors talk." "What do they say?" Mireya asked. Nira hesitated. "They say white women's words are like snake medicine. Makes strong man weak." Mireya thought of the buffalo robe, of the water on her lips, of the way Ashen watched her without touching. "I just want to survive," she said. Naira nodded. "Yes, we all want this. But survival does not mean same thing for all." He rode off, leaving her alone with his words as the prairie rolled endlessly beneath the sun. She was beginning to understand. Her survival carried a price, not only for herself, but for the man whose single moment of hesitation had spared her life. When they crested a low rise, she saw it. A spread of teepees arranged like a small city on the plains. Smoke curled from cook fires. Figures moved between lodges. Apache children laughed at the edges of the camp until they saw the returning riders. The laughter stopped. Mireya felt dozens of eyes settle on her as the news spread. Apache women stepped from the lodges. Men laid aside their work. Elders leaned on their staffs to see more clearly. A white woman, alive, riding behind their war chief. Like what? Mireya did not yet know, but she knew her fate would be decided here. What she was to them. And that uncertainty showed on every face she passed. As they moved fully into the camp, Mireya Knox straightened her back despite the bone-deep exhaustion dragging at her limbs. If these were to be her final hours, she would face them with the same resolve that had carried her through grief and isolation. But death did not come. Only stares, murmurs, and the slow realization that her trial had only begun. She had survived the ride. What waited here might prove far worse. Ashen dismounted first, then reached up to steady her. His hands were firm at her waist as her legs faltered. And for a heartbeat, only a heartbeat, she leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. Then he released her, and she stood alone, wrists bound before her, lifting her chin to meet the eyes of those who would decide her fate. The true test began that night. Fire snapped and hissed, sparks lifting toward stars that seemed close enough to touch. Mireya sat with her back against a stretched hide tied between wooden posts. Her wrists were still bound, though the rope now allowed limited movement. She had been placed at the edge of the camp, far enough to mark her as an outsider, close enough to remain under watch. For 3 days, she existed in this in-between space, observing a life she had only known through fearful whispers and newspaper stories that painted Apache people as monsters. What she saw was something else entirely. Apache children ran between the teepees, playing games that stirred memories of her own childhood. Apache women worked steadily, scraping hides, stitching with bone needles, tending cook fires with the same quiet rhythm Mireya had once known in her own home. Men shaped arrows, repaired weapons, and trained boys in skills meant for survival and honor. It was a living, breathing society, whole, complete. And she was the intrusion within it. Some of the women attempted small kindnesses. An older woman with gentle eyes brought her a wooden bowl of stew the first night. Buffalo meat simmered with wild onion and prairie roots. A younger woman, heavy with child, showed her where she could relieve herself with dignity despite the bonds, standing guard until she finished. But for every kindness, there were twice as many hard stares and sharp words she did not need to understand to feel. To them, she was the enemy, the intruder, one of the people who had brought disease, bullets, and fences to land that had once known no borders. As night settled fully over the camp, Mireya watched families gather around their fires to share the evening meal. Stories were told. She could tell by the animated hands, the children leaning forward in rapt attention. Somewhere, a flute carried a melody, both unfamiliar and achingly beautiful. Her gaze lingered on one family in particular, a warrior with ritual scars across his chest, his wife nursing an infant while keeping watch over 2 older children wrestling in the dust. The scene was so ordinary, so universal, that pain tightened Mireya's chest. It was everything she had lost, everything she would never have again. You watch. You learn. The voice startled her. Ashen stepped from the shadows, moving with the quiet ease that had earned him his name. He lowered himself to sit a short distance away, cross-legged, respectful. His face bore ceremonial markings now, not war paint. "I'm trying to understand," Mireya said. "Why?" he asked. It was a fair question. Why try to understand people who might kill her before the moon turned? The answer came from somewhere deeper than reason. "Because I'm here," she said. "Because I'm alive when I shouldn't be." She hesitated, then continued softly. "Because I've been living among the dead for a long time." Ashen studied her with eyes that seemed to strip away pretense. "Your man," he said. "He is gone." "Yes, 3 months now. Consumption." Her voice tightened. "I watched him fade like smoke until nothing remained but memory." "This is why you asked for a kiss?" Ashen said. You wanted to follow him. Mireya considered that. Had she truly wanted death? Or had she simply wanted to feel something other than the numbness that had hollowed her out? I wanted to die as myself, she said at last. Not as something broken, not afraid. She trailed off, unable to shape the rest. You wanted to choose, Ashen said quietly, even in death. He looked at her steadily. That is why you live. They sat in silence, listening as the camp eased into its nighttime rhythm. At last, Mireya found the courage to ask the question that had haunted her since the fire. Why did you spare me? She asked. Truly. Ashen did not answer at once. When he spoke, his words came slowly, as if translating more than language. My grandmother, he said, was a white woman, taken when she was young. Mireya held still. She fought, Ashen continued. Every day. She fought until one day. She did not. He searched for the right word. She became Lunamaro, new moon. She became my grandfather's first wife. She bore him 3 sons, strong sons. Mireya absorbed this in silence, struggling to reconcile it with everything she had been taught to believe. Ashen's gaze remained steady. Survival, he said, sometimes begins with surrender, and sometimes with choice. But when she was old, Ashen continued, his voice low, steady. When my grandfather was gone, and her sons had grown into warriors with families of their own. She told me a secret. Mireya listened without moving. She said she never stopped being both, he went on. A white woman and Lunamaro, the new moon. She said the heart can hold 2 worlds if it is strong enough. His gaze lifted to her, measuring. You did not beg. You did not cry. You asked for a kiss the way a warrior's woman says farewell. He paused. Maybe your heart is strong. Maybe it is not. He let the words settle. We will see. Mireya swallowed. What happens to me now? Tomorrow, the council meets, Ashen said. They will decide. And if they decide I should die, then you die. His tone was plain, unsoftened by comfort. But beneath it, she sensed something else. Control, restraint, intention. But you will die as you chose, he added. As a woman, not as a shadow. He stood to leave, then stopped. From a pouch at his belt, he drew something small and pressed it into her bound hands. In the firelight, Mireya saw it was a piece of hard travel bread, the kind meant to last across long journeys. For strength, Ashen said, tomorrow, you will need it. Then he vanished back into the dark. Mireya studied the bread in her hands. It was a simple thing, but she understood its meaning. He was making certain she would face what came next with dignity, with her body steady, her will intact. She thought of Lunamaro, the white woman who had become New Moon. Had she once sat like this? Watching an unfamiliar camp, waiting to learn whether morning would bring death or transformation. Had small mercies like this been what kept her from breaking? A child's laughter drew Mireya's attention back to the family she had been watching. A warrior lifted a child onto his shoulders while another clung to his leg. Their mother smiled, shaking her head at the noise. It was a scene that could have belonged anywhere, if one looked past the surface. Mireya bit into the hard bread and chewed slowly. Tomorrow, the council would decide her fate. But tonight, she was alive. Life moved around her, ordinary, complex, human. She thought of Jonah Rook, of the home that had burned to ash, of the life she had lost. For the first time in months, the memories did not bring only pain. Something else had joined the grief: curiosity. The camp quieted as families withdrew into their teepees. Fires sank to embers. Night guards moved between lodges like living shadows. Mireya drew her knees to her chest, conserving warmth against the prairie wind. A coyote howled in the distance. Others answered. The sound no longer frightened her. She was beginning to understand that true danger did not live in the wilderness, but in the space between worlds, where one identity ended and another might begin. If her heart was strong enough to hold two worlds, as Lune Maro's had been, what would that mean? Could she honor Jonah's memory while learning to live among those he had once been taught to fear? Could she remain Mireya Knox while becoming something new? The question circled her mind as the stars wheeled overhead, counting the hours until dawn and the council's judgment. Whatever came, she would meet it standing, eyes open, heart scarred, but still beating, ready to choose again. The fire beside her faded to embers, yet Mireya did not feel the cold. She thought of a white woman who became new moon, of a warrior who hesitated when he should have struck, of a kiss asked for but never given, that had somehow changed everything. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight, she had questions, hard bread, and the strange comfort of being alive in a world she did not yet understand, but was beginning to see clearly. Morning arrived wrapped in mist that clung to the ground like pale fingers. Mireya had barely slept, her thoughts turning endlessly. As the camp stirred, she felt it immediately. The air was different, tight with purpose. Apache women moved through their tasks with sharp efficiency, their voices subdued. Apache children were kept close, watched carefully. Men gathered in small groups, speaking in low, urgent tones. Mireya understood. She was the stone dropped into still water, and the ripples were spreading. An elderly woman approached her, back bent, face carved by years of sun and wind. Without a word, she gestured for Mireya to follow. They walked to the river's edge, where other women had already gathered. Mireya's bonds were loosened enough to allow her to wash her face and hands. The cold water shocked her fully awake. Eyes followed her movements, some curious, others openly hostile. A younger woman stepped forward, her hair heavy with beadwork, her expression sharp with contempt. She spoke harshly to the others, pointing at Mireya with disgust. Several women nodded in agreement. Mireya recognized her. Nira, Rook's wife. And Mireya understood then. The council had not yet spoken, but judgment had already begun. Mireya had seen them together before, moving through the camp as one. Now the woman stepped closer, close enough that Mireya could see the raw fury burning in her dark eyes. The words came fast, sharp, impossible to understand, yet their meaning needed no translation. You do not belong here. You are a sickness among us. Before the tension could break, another woman intervened. Older, her posture calm but commanding. She spoke a single, cutting phrase. Nira's voice fell silent. She stepped back, but the promise in her glare was unmistakable. This was not finished. As they returned toward the heart of the camp, Mireya saw the preparations taking shape. A great fire was being built in the central clearing, arranged with deliberate care. Elders emerged from their lodges wearing ceremonial headdresses, their faces painted with symbols of lineage, authority, and judgment. The kind-eyed woman who had brought Mireya food before appeared at her side. Without speaking, she pressed a small bundle into Mireya's hands, sage, tightly bound. Through gestures alone, She indicated that Mireya should hold it. Whether for protection or ritual, Mireya could not tell. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the morning mist. Soon the entire camp gathered, forming a wide circle around the central fire. Mireya was guided forward, placed where she could see and be seen by everyone. Ashen stood with the Apache riders, his expression unreadable, giving no sign that they had spoken at all the night before. The eldest of the elders stepped forward, Orson Redfeather. His presence alone silenced the camp. He raised a painted staff, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of generations. Mireya did not understand the words, but she felt them. They struck something deep in her chest, something old and instinctive. Others spoke after him. One by one, voices rose, each offering judgment, her fate. She could tell by tone alone who argued for her death. Voices sharp, hands cutting the air. Others spoke more slowly, with restraint. Perhaps caution, perhaps mercy. Then Rook stood. His voice rang with conviction. He pointed at Mireya, then at Ashen, his words drawing murmurs of agreement from parts of the circle. Nira stood beside him, watching with fierce approval, adding her voice to his. Mireya tightened her grip on the sage. Its bitter scent anchored her to the moment. She forced herself to remain still, refusing to show fear despite the way her heart thundered in her chest. An elderly woman rose next, small, bent with age, yet carrying an authority that quieted every whisper. Ashen Willow spoke at length, her voice moving like wind through tall grass. Several times she gestured toward Mireya, her tone neither hostile nor kind, only thoughtful. When she finished, she asked a question directed at Mireya herself. The woman beside Mireya leaned close and whispered, "She asks why you are here, why you still live." Mireya knew this was her moment. She rose slowly, aware of hundreds of eyes upon her. The sage trembled in her hands. "I am here because your war chief spared me," she said, speaking clearly, deliberately. "I live because, when death came for me, I chose to face it as myself, not as something broken by grief and fear." She paused, steadying her breath. "My husband, Jonah Rook, is dead. My home is ash. Everything I built with my own hands is gone. I should have died with it." Her voice did not falter. But I did not. I don't know why. I only know that when death stood before me, I asked for something else first. And your chief heard something in that request that stayed his hand. The woman beside her translated slowly, carefully, turning English into Apache words. The circle listened in silence. "I do not ask for your acceptance," Mireya continued. "I do not ask for a place among you. I ask only this. If I must die, let me die as I chose, with dignity, with my eyes open." As Mireya Knox, a woman who buried her husband, survived alone, and faced your warriors without begging. As her words were carried through the crowd, reactions rippled outward. Some faces hardened, others shifted with something closer to reluctant respect. Then Ashen stepped forward. The camp seemed to hold its breath. He spoke without heat, without raised voice, but with a certainty that demanded attention. The translator whispered fragments to Mireya. His grandmother's story, strength found in choosing, the spirit sending trials in unexpected forms. Then Ashen said something that caused a visible stir. The translator's eyes widened. He says, "If the council decides you must die, it must be an honorable death." She swallowed. "He says you showed a warrior's heart." Her voice dropped lower. He says, anyone who disagrees must face him first. The meaning swept through the circle like fire through dry grass. Ashen had placed his honor on the line for her. And nothing in the camp would ever be the same again. A white woman, an enemy. Everyone understood the cost. The political weight of keeping her alive pressed heavily on the gathering, and no one pretended otherwise. Rook exploded. His voice cracked with fury and betrayal, sharp enough to cut through the circle. Others joined him, voices stacking atop one another, the council's order threatening to unravel into chaos. Orson Redfeather struck his staff hard against the earth, once, then again, until silence was forced back into place. More voices rose, but the balance had changed. Ashen's declaration had shifted the ground beneath them. This was no longer only about whether a white captive should live or die. It had become a question of honor, of how courage was recognized, of what Ashen's stance meant for unity within the people. The sun climbed to its height, beating down without mercy. Mireya felt the world sway. Fatigue and tension pulled at her, threatening to drag her to her knees. She locked them instead, stayed upright. At last, the elders withdrew to speak among themselves. The crowd fractured into smaller knots of conversation, some sharp, some hushed. Mireya caught Ashen's gaze across the clearing. His face gave nothing away, but his posture carried a coiled readiness, like a man prepared to stand alone if required. The kind woman pressed a water skin into Mireya's hands. "Drink," she urged quietly. "This is not finished." As Mireya drank, she noticed the way the people had separated without meaning to. Those aligned with Rook gathered to one side. Others, some backing Ashen, some simply urging restraint, shifted away. She was witnessing the tribe's inner workings, decisions forged not by decree, but through argument, consensus, and fracture. It felt strange and familiar. She had seen similar tensions in town halls once, back in a life that no longer existed. Only then, the stakes had never been her life. A young boy, no more than 8, broke free from his mother's grip and ran toward her. His mother cried out in alarm, but he had already stopped in front of Mireya, staring up with open curiosity. He spoke, his tone unmistakably a question. The translator smiled faintly. "He wants to know if your hair is really made of fire, like his grandmother's stories say." Despite everything, Mireya almost laughed. She knelt carefully and allowed the boy to touch a strand of her red hair. His eyes widened in awe before his mortified mother rushed forward, pulling him back while casting fearful glances at Mireya and the watching crowd. But something had shifted. Mireya was no longer just an argument, not merely a problem. She was a woman kneeling before a child. The elders returned. The crowd closed in once more, tension tightening like a drawn rope. Whatever decision had been reached would echo through the people for years. Orson Redfeather raised his staff again. Mireya straightened. The sage bundle in her hands had been crushed, its scent sharp and overpowering. She thought of Jonah Rook, of what he might have said if he could see her now. He had always told her she was stronger than she believed. Now she would find out. Orson began to speak. His words fell slowly, deliberately, like stones dropped into still water. Mireya waited. Her heart thundered as the translator leaned close. "The council has spoken," the woman whispered. "You will not die today." Relief nearly stole Mireya's breath. Then the translator paused, listening further, and Mireya felt the air turn cold. "But you must prove you are worthy to live among the people," she continued. not only strong enough to die with honor. Mireya's knees weakened. Then came the words that froze her blood. You will face Aira. She speaks for the Women's Council. The translator swallowed. If you fall and do not rise, the warriors will grant you a swift death. If you stand, if you show heart, you may live under the protection of Ashen, who has taken responsibility for you. The crowd parted. A woman stepped forward. Mireya's heart sank. Aira was everything she was not. Tall, broad-shouldered, her body forged by years of labor and survival. Muscle moved beneath her skin with controlled power. Her dark hair was pulled tight, revealing a face both striking and unforgiving. Aira spoke, her voice carrying across the clearing. The translator did not need to explain. The challenge had been accepted. Contempt needed no translation. Aira looked at Mireya Knox as if her very presence stained the ground. In Aira's eyes, Mireya was an insult to every wound endured, every hunger survived by Apache women while white women lived behind walls and doors. The translator whispered, almost apologetic. She calls you weak as a newborn rabbit. Says Ashen disgraces himself by standing for you. The woman's voice sharpened. She says she will prove it with her hands. A circle closed around them, bodies pressed in tight, forming a living ring. No escape, no distance. Mireya was guided to one side. Aira stepped opposite her. The rules were brief, carried through gestures and broken translation. No weapons, no mercy. The fight ended when one could no longer rise. Honor existed only in endurance. Mireya's thoughts raced. She had never fought in her life. Her hands had built walls, kneaded dough, turned soil. Her body was already weakened by days bound to a saddle. Aira looked capable of breaking her in half without effort. Then Mireya found Ashen's eyes across the ring. His face revealed nothing. But he gave the smallest nod. Not encouragement, not protection. Acknowledgement. You chose this, it said. Now walk it. The staff struck the ground. Aira moved. She came fast and hard like a storm breaking loose. Mireya barely raised her arms before the blow landed, sending her sprawling. The ground slammed into her chest. Dust filled her mouth. Light burst behind her eyes. The crowd roared approval. She heard Rook's voice rise above the others, sharp with triumph. Stay down, her body begged. Let it end. But Mireya thought of Jonah Rook, of digging his grave with her own hands, of winter nights survived alone while wolves cried outside her door, of facing death and asking not for mercy, but for choice. She pushed herself up, first to her knees, then to her feet. Aira's eyes narrowed. She charged again, locking an arm around Mireya's waist and driving her backward with brutal strength. Mireya's head struck the earth. The world dulled to gray. Laughter followed. Jeers. Someone shouted for the finishing blow. Pain exploded through Mireya's ribs, where Aira's knee had crushed into her. Blood filled her mouth. Get up! The voice in her mind sounded like Jonah. You are stronger than you think. You always were. Get up. Mireya rolled onto her side and spat blood. Her hands dug into the dirt. Her legs shook, but held. She stood. This time, when Aira lunged, Mireya stepped sideways. It was barely a movement, just enough. Aira's timing broke. Instinct took over. Mireya grabbed a fistful of tightly pulled hair and yanked. Aira roared, rage more than pain, and spun, backhanding Mireya across the face. Mireya went down again, but she was already moving, scrambling away, forcing space, dragging herself upright. The crowd's noise changed. The laughter thinned. Watching replaced mockery. This woman should have stayed down, but she didn't. Ira slowed, circling now, measuring. Mireya's left eye swelled shut. Her lips split. Each breath tore through her ribs. Still she stayed standing, hands raised in a pitiful guard. Ira feinted left, then struck right. Her fist buried itself in Mireya's stomach. Air fled her lungs. She folded, choking. But when Ira reached for her hair again, Mireya reacted on pure desperation. She bit down. Teeth sank into flesh. Ira shrieked, outraged more than hurt, and hurled Mireya aside. This time, Mireya did not rise immediately. Her body had reached its edge. She pushed only to hands and knees, head bowed, blood dripping into the dust. Silence fell. This was the moment. Would she collapse and accept death? Or would she find something, anything, left? Her arms trembled. Vision blurred. Pain begged her to surrender. But beneath the pain lived memory. The woman who built a cabin beside her husband. The woman who birthed a child that lived 3 days. The woman who buried both love and hope. And stood again. Mireya planted her hands in the dirt and began to rise. She had buried both husband and child with her own hands, and still found air enough to breathe. The sound that tore from her chest was part sob, part animal growl, dragged out of her by pain and memory alike. Mireya Knox forced herself upright. She swayed, vision swimming, but she was standing. Blood streaked her chin. Her body promised bruises that would bloom for days, maybe weeks. Yet she lifted her trembling fists and faced Ira again. The Apache woman did not move. Ira studied her now with a look that had shifted from raw contempt into something colder, sharper. Judgment, measurement. She spoke. The words rippled through the gathered crowd, stirring murmurs. Then Ira stepped forward with slow, deliberate strides. Mireya braced herself for the final blow. But Ira stopped just beyond reach. She spoke again, louder, not only to Mireya, but to everyone watching. Then, in a gesture that sent shock through the circle, Ira lowered her fists. The translator's voice shook as she whispered urgently. She says, "You have shown the heart of a survivor." She says any woman, Apache or white, who refuses to stay down has earned the right to try living. A pause. She grants you victory. Mireya's legs finally failed her. She dropped to her knees, not in defeat, but in bone-deep relief. The crowd erupted. Some voices rose in approval, others in anger, disbelief, or protest. But the truth stood undeniable. The fight was over, and somehow, against all reason, she had won. Through her remaining clear eye, Mireya saw Ashen moving toward her. He knelt beside her, his hands unexpectedly gentle as he checked her injuries. He said something low to Ira. She answered with a brief nod and turned away, spine straight, pride intact, teeth marks still visible on her arm. "You did well," Ashen said quietly, meant only for her. "Ira is impressed," he added. "That does not come easily." "I can't feel my face," Mireya muttered through swollen lips. Something like restrained amusement flickered in his eyes. "You will. Tomorrow, and many days after." He helped her stand, steadying her when she wavered. "But you will feel it as one who belongs, not as an outsider." Orson Redfeather struck his staff against the ground, speaking words that sealed what had been decided. The translator, who Mireya now realized had hovered anxiously throughout the fight, explained softly, "You are accepted under Ashen's protection. You will live among the Apache women until other arrangements are made. You will work. You will learn. If you bring dishonor, Ashen shares it." If you prove false, he pays the price. Mireya understood the weight of it then. Ashen had placed his standing, perhaps even his leadership, on her survival. She tried to speak, to thank him, to ask why. Her mouth refused to cooperate. As if hearing her thoughts, Ashen said, "My grandmother earned her place through strength. You have earned the chance to do the same. Do not waste it." The crowd slowly dispersed, people returning to their lives with hushed voices and backward glances. Many still looked at her with suspicion, some with open dislike. But something new had taken root. Recognition. Rook spat into the dirt as he passed, his wife beside him, her glare sharp with venom. They would be trouble later. Others nodded once in passing. One warrior even offered what might have been approval. The kind woman who had translated before returned with water and soft cloths. "Come," she said gently. "We clean wounds. Tomorrow, real work begins. Tonight, you rest as one who fought well." As Mireya was led away, she glanced back once more. Ira stood near her lodge, arms crossed. When their eyes met, Ira inclined her head, just slightly. Warrior to warrior, woman to woman, survivor to survivor. Mireya returned the nod as best her battered body allowed. She had won more than a fight. She had won the right to discover who she might become in a world where death had been asked to wait, and where a single request had changed everything. The morning sun painted the eastern sky in rose and gold as Mireya stood before the gathered people once again. Her body sang with pain. Purple bruises marked her skin, and every movement carried sharp reminders of yesterday's trial. Still, she stood straight, chin lifted, wearing a simple dress the Apache women had given her to replace her ruined nightgown. The ceremonial circle had reformed. But the air was different now. Yesterday it had crackled with hostility. Today it carried expectation and curiosity. She had learned there would be 3 trials. This was the second. Ira stepped forward. Mireya tensed instinctively, but Ira's expression held no malice this time. Only the same measuring calm she'd worn at the end of their fight. Ira spoke in a clear, steady voice. Loon translated. The kind woman Mireya Knox had come to depend on stood close as Loon translated. "Ira says yesterday you showed strength of the body." Loon murmured. "You endured pain. You rose when beaten down." Ira's voice carried clearly across the circle. "Today," Loon continued, "you must show another strength. The strength of learning, of changing. The strength to become something new without forgetting what you were." Mireya nodded slowly. She did not fully understand, but she was ready to face whatever waited. Ira stepped forward, holding 2 items, a bone awl and a piece of softened hide. Without a word, she demonstrated. Her hands moved with practiced certainty, piercing, pulling, setting each stitch with precise control. The beadwork that formed beneath her fingers was simple, yet graceful, a pattern that flowed as naturally as breath. Then she placed the tools into Mireya's hands. Understanding settled in. This was not a trial of violence. It was a test of usefulness, of whether she could add to the life of the people around her. Mireya's hands trembled slightly as she took the awl, not from fear, but from the bruises and swelling left by yesterday's fight. She had sewn before. Every frontier woman had. She had mended shirts, patched quilts, stitched Jonah Rook's coats by firelight. But this was different. The awl felt strange. The hide resisted in ways cloth never had. Her fingers stiff and swollen, lacked precision. Her first attempts were clumsy, stitches crooked, beads slipped and scattered. The pattern refused to take shape. Quiet snickers rose from some of the Apache women. Rook's wife stood with folded arms, satisfaction written plainly on her face. Mireya kept working. She remembered Jonah teaching her to shape wood, telling her the grain had a will of its own. You couldn't fight it, only learn it. Maybe hide was the same. She adjusted her grip, watched how Era angled the awl, let her fingers feel the resistance instead of forcing it. Slowly, painfully, the work improved. The stitches steadied. The beads began to align into something recognizable, not beautiful, not skilled, but intentional. Progress. The sun climbed. Sweat gathered on Mireya's brow, stinging as it ran into cuts along her cheek. Her back ached. Her fingers cramped. She did not stop. Each stitch was survival. Each pull of the thread was a step towards staying alive. Better. The single English word startled her. Ira took the hide, inspecting it closely. Her expression remained firm, unreadable. Then she showed another technique. How to hold the awl differently, how to guide it rather than push. Mireya tried again. This time the improvement was clear. A young girl, no more than 10, edged closer to watch. Her mother reached to pull her back, but Ira spoke sharply. The mother hesitated, then let the child remain. The girl pointed at Mireya's mistakes, giggling softly, not cruelly, and showed her with small fingers how to correct them. Mireya almost smiled. Children, she realized, were the same everywhere. Curious, honest, quick to see effort where adults saw only difference. More children gathered, forming a loose half-circle. One boy proudly displayed his own beadwork, flawless despite his age. Their chatter wrapped around Mireya like a shield, easing the weight of judgment. "See?" Loon whispered. "Children know. They see you try. They see you learn. This matters." By midday, Mireya finished a small piece, a simple rectangle of hide decorated with basic beadwork. Crude, uneven, but complete, made by her hands, under their eyes. Ira took it, turned it over, examined every stitch. Silence spread through the gathering. This judgment carried weight equal to yesterday's fight, perhaps more. Courage might earn respect, but a woman who could not contribute would remain a burden. Ira lifted Mireya's work for all to see. She spoke calmly, neither praising nor condemning. Then she removed one of her own armbands, intricate, masterfully beaded, and held it beside Mireya's piece. The contrast was undeniable. One showed decades of mastery, the other, a beginner's struggle. Ira continued speaking. Loon translated in an excited whisper. "She says this," Loon said, indicating Ira's armband, "is the result of 30 years. She says this," gesturing to Mireya's work, "is one morning. She says the stitches are straight. The pattern is finished. She says hands that can learn this in one morning can learn more, if given time." Ira returned the piece of hide to Mireya Knox, then turned to address the gathered Apache women. Her voice carried authority, and Mireya caught familiar names woven into her speech, women who would be expected to teach, to guide, to test. Not everyone agreed. Nira, the woman Mireya had learned was Rook's wife, stepped forward. Her words were sharp, filled with accusation. She pointed first at Mireya, then at Ashen, her meaning unmistakable even without translation. This white woman was being favored, given chances she had not earned. Ira's reply came instantly, her tone cutting and final. Whatever she said made Naira's face darken with fury. But it also forced her to step back. Mireya saw it clearly now. The order among the Apache women was as layered and unforgiving as among the Apache riders, and Era stood high within it. Orson Redfeather, who had observed everything in silence, raised his staff. He spoke briefly, formally. Loon translated. The first trial showed strength of body. The second showed strength of will. A pause. Tomorrow comes the third trial. Another pause, heavier this time. The hardest. Tomorrow you must prove your heart. Mireya wanted to ask what that meant, but the moment had passed. The gathering dissolved. Children scattered back to their mothers. Warriors returned to their duties. The rhythm of daily life closed in around her again. Yet something had shifted. As Mireya was guided back toward the women's lodge, she noticed small changes. A few women nodded as she passed. One elderly woman touched her shoulder gently, a gesture neither warm nor cold, simply acknowledging. They were not accepting her, not yet, but they were recognizing her effort. Inside the lodge, Ira surprised everyone by sitting beside Mireya. She laid out new materials, different hides, varied beads, several bone awls of different sizes. Using gestures and the few English words she knew, Ira demonstrated more advanced techniques. Mireya's bruised fingers protested, but she focused with everything she had. This was no longer just about beadwork. It was about proving she could be taught, that she could change, that she could become more than the widow who had once asked for death. As the afternoon wore on, other Apache women drifted closer. Not all were kind. Naira remained distant, watching with open hostility. But others showed curiosity. They corrected Mireya's grip, adjusted her posture, showed her better ways to guide the all. One woman, heavy with child, even smiled when Mireya completed a difficult stitch without tearing the hide. "You are doing well," Loon murmured as evening approached. "Many thought you would refuse, thought you would say such work was beneath a white woman. But you sit, you learn, you try. This matters more than you know." Mireya flexed her aching fingers. "What is tomorrow's trial?" Loon's expression sobered. "The heart trial is different. I cannot say more. It is forbidden." She glanced around, then leaned closer. "Remember who you were. Remember who you might become. When the moment comes, choose with your whole heart, not half." That night, Mireya lay on her buffalo robe, studying her hands in the dim firelight. Small cuts marked her skin. Calluses were already forming where she gripped the awl too tightly. Frontier hands, but changed. These marks came from Apache teaching, from Ira's patience, from children laughing as they corrected her mistakes. She thought of Jonah Rook and wondered what he would think if he could see her now. Would he recognize the woman learning beadwork from the people he had once been taught to fear? Would he understand why she chose to live among them instead of accepting the easy death she had nearly embraced beside her burning home? Outside the lodge, the camp settled into night. Guards took their places. Families gathered inside their shelters. Cooking fires dimmed to embers. The sounds of Apache life surrounded her. Not comfortable, perhaps never comfortable, but familiar. Tomorrow would bring the final trial, the heart trial. Mireya suspected it would demand more than endurance or skillful hands. It would force her to decide who she truly was and who she was willing to become. She closed her eyes, Her fingers still held the small piece of beadwork she had made. It was simple, uneven, small, but it was proof. Proof that Mireya Knox could learn, could adapt, could find purpose in a world she once believed had ended in smoke and fire. Tomorrow would decide if that was enough. If a heart shattered by loss could learn a new rhythm, if a white woman could truly walk the path opened by an Apache warrior's moment of hesitation. The bone awl rested beside her, an instrument of creation, not destruction. Perhaps that was the lesson. Survival was not only refusing to die. Perhaps it was learning how to build something new from what had burned away. Tomorrow, she would find out. The days that followed the trials bled into one another, soft and indistinct, like colors washed thin by rain. Mireya Knox's hands grew steadier on the bone awl. Her grasp of Apache words widened, and her place within the camp shifted from curiosity to something more layered. Not welcomed, not rejected, simply recognized. She worked beside the Apache women, learning the cadence of their days, the meaning hidden in gestures when words failed, the quiet stories stitched into every task. It was during the moon of falling leaves, when autumn brushed the prairie in gold and rust, that everything changed. The storm arrived without warning, the way plain storms always did. One moment the sky stood clear and wide. The next, black clouds boiled up along the horizon like enraged spirits. Wind struck first, wrenching at the lodges, scattering sparks from cooking fires into the grass. Then a rain came. Not gentle, but violent, pounding the earth into mud within moments. Mireya was helping secure belongings when she heard the scream. A child had wandered too close to the creek. The sudden surge had torn him from the bank. His mother's cries cut through the howling wind. Without thinking, Mireya ran toward the water. Others were already there, but the current was fierce. The child, too small, was dragged farther downstream with every heartbeat. Mireya saw Ashen plunge into the torrent, fighting the water with all his strength. Even he could not reach the boy in time. Mireya knew this creek. She had washed clothes here, walked its bends during quiet hours. Downstream, a fallen cottonwood formed an eddy, a place where the water slowed, if she reached it first. She ran along the bank, dress soaked, boots sliding in mud. Shouts followed her, torn apart by wind. The cottonwood emerged through the rain, and she did not hesitate. The water was shockingly cold, the current stronger than she expected, but she had grown up near rivers, learned to swim despite her mother's insistence that it wasn't proper for a lady. The child swept past, limp. Mireya lunged, caught fabric, dragged him against her chest. The current clawed at them, tried to tear him free, but she kicked toward the eddy, using the cottonwood to break the water's grip. They tumbled into calmer flow. Her feet found mud. The boy was not breathing. She rolled him over and struck his back the way she had once seen a neighbor do when a child nearly drowned. Nothing. Again. Again. Water burst from his mouth, followed by a sharp, gasping cry. Mireya clutched him tight and struggled toward shore as others arrived. Strong hands pulled them free, Ashen's. Concern carved his face, then shifted when he saw the boy breathing. The child's mother collapsed, sobbing as she gathered her son. She spoke rapidly, gratitude spilling from her eyes without need of translation. Others pressed close, hands touching Mireya's arms, her shoulders, voices warm in ways she had never heard directed at her. She could not respond. Shaking overtook her as cold and exhaustion crashed in together. Ashen wrapped his blanket around her shoulders. Without realizing it, she leaned into his warmth. Come, he said quietly. You need fire, dry clothes. He led her, not to the women's lodge, but to his own. She should have objected, knew the weight of what it meant. But her teeth chattered too hard to speak. Inside, a small fire burned in the central pit, shadows dancing across hide walls painted with horses and battles. Ashen handed her a soft hide dress, then turned his back as she changed. The courtesy struck deeper than any grand gesture. When she was wrapped in warmth, he motioned for her to sit by the fire. The boy lives because of you, he said, feeding the flames. Anyone would have, Mireya murmured. No. His interruption was calm, certain. Others tried. The current was too strong. But you knew the river, knew where to go. You thought like someone who belongs to this land. They sat in silence as the storm raged outside. Mireya studied him in the firelight. The firm planes of his face, the controlled movements, the hands capable of violence or gentleness in equal measure. Why did you spare me? The question slipped free before she could stop it. That night, by my burning home. Why? He was quiet so long, she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was thoughtful. My grandmother once told me the spirits sometimes test us in ways we do not expect, he said. She said her capture was such a test. For her, for my grandfather, for the people. When you asked for a kiss before death. He paused, searching for words. It was like lightning in a clear sky. Unexpected. It made me think the spirits were testing again. And what has the test shown? Mireya asked. His dark eyes met hers across the fire. That you are stronger than you appear. That you can learn, change. That you carry the heart of a survivor. Not only in body, but in spirit. The boy lives because you have learned enough to know our land, our waters. I am not Apache, Mireya said softly. I am still Mireya Knox, widow of Jonah Rook, formerly of Missouri. Yes, Ashen replied. But also, no, Ashen said quietly. You are Mireya, who stood against Ira and earned respect. Mireya who learns our ways with steady, patient hands. Mireya who risked her life for an Apache child without hesitation. You are both, he continued, and that is not weakness. The fire snapped softly between them. Outside, the storm was easing, the wind's howl fading into low whispers. Mireya felt something shift inside her, like ice breaking apart during spring thaw. The careful distance she had kept, the walls she had built around her heart, they were beginning to fall. I dream of him, she confessed. Jonah. Sometimes he's standing in the doorway of our cabin, smiling, asking me to come home. And I want to. She swallowed. But then I wake up, and I'm here, and I don't know any more where home is. Ashen nodded slowly. After Tala died giving birth, I dreamed the same. She called to me, said the spirit world held no pain. But I had duty. I had purpose. In time, the dreams changed. She still came, but to tell me goodbye, to tell me that living was not a betrayal of the dead. When does it stop hurting? Mireya asked. It does not stop, Ashen said, but it changes. It becomes like a scar, always there, but no longer the only thing you feel. Mireya pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The women whisper about us, about what it means that you protect me. Let them whisper. Yet something in his voice betrayed that he was not untouched by it. It could harm your standing, she said softly. Rook already speaks against you. Rook speaks from fear, Ashen replied. He sees the world changing and wants to freeze it with force. But the world does not stop for any man's fear. He studied her. You worry for my name? You risk much for me, she said. I don't want to be. Her words stopped as he moved around the fire and knelt beside her, suddenly close. She saw the faint lines around his eyes, the scar along his jaw she had noticed the first night, the measured rise and fall of his breath. Mireya Knox, he said formally, I will speak truth. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. When you asked for a kiss before death, you woke something in me I believed died with Tala, not only as a man toward a woman, but as one spirit recognizing another. You chose to face death with courage, with a strange request that showed you understood something about choosing how we meet fate. His hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. His fingers brushed her cheek with infinite care. I have watched you through these moons. You could have survived by doing the least required. Instead, you learned. You gave. You saved our children. You are becoming a bridge between worlds, as my grandmother once was. Mireya's heart raced. I don't know if I'm ready. Jonah Rook walks with the spirits, Ashen said gently. And a man who built a home with such love would want you to live, not merely endure. She thought of the night her cabin burned, of the kiss she had asked for before death. Now life stretched before her in ways she never imagined. If you kissed me now, she said carefully, it wouldn't be before death, but before. Before what? Ashen asked. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Before life, she said. A new life, not the one either of us planned, but perhaps the one the spirits intended when they crossed our paths. The storm had passed completely. Through the smoke hole of the lodge, stars began to appear. The fire burned low, casting them in intimate shadow. Some will celebrate, Ashen said. Some will rage, but all will accept, if we prove worthy of each other and of the people. His voice dropped. The question is not what others decide. The question is what your heart chooses. Mireya closed her eyes. The moment balanced like a blade. One path led to safety, keeping the boundaries that had protected her. The other led into unknown ground that would change everything. When she opened her eyes, she knew. My heart says Jonah taught me how to love, she said, but you are teaching me how to live again. My heart says I asked for a kiss before death, but what I truly needed was a reason to choose life. She breathed in. My heart says yes. The kiss that followed was nothing like the one she had imagined beside the flames that night. It was gentle, questioning. A quiet conversation between two souls shaped by loss, reaching carefully toward something new. It tasted of rain and wood smoke, of sorrow transformed but not erased, of two worlds meeting in the space between heartbeats. When they parted, Mireya saw her own wonder reflected in Ashen's eyes. Outside, voices rose as the storm's aftermath called the camp back to work and reckoning. But for this brief, quiet moment, inside the lodge they had found something worth the risk, worth the whispers, worth the long walk from the edge of death toward the fragile promise of life. What happens now? Mireya asked. Ashen rose and extended his hand. Now, he said, we face tomorrow together. You as Mireya Knox, learning to walk as part of the people, and me as Ashen, who sees wisdom in bridges between worlds. Let others speak as they will. We know our truth. She took his hand and stood beside him. Tomorrow would bring trials. Rook's anger, Naira's sharp gossip, the slow and difficult joining of two lives shaped by different worlds. But tonight, she had chosen life, and been chosen in return. The kiss that had not come before death had arrived before something far more dangerous and far more beautiful. The chance to live fully again, to let a heart learn new rhythms without silencing old songs, to love in a way that did not erase loss, but grew beside it, like wildflowers rising after fire. Outside the lodge, the camp stirred as families inspected storm damage. Inside, two people stood hand in hand, ready to meet what came next. Sometimes the spirits send their greatest gifts disguised as endings, and the bridge between worlds is built one choice, one kiss, one brave heart at a time. The winter moon hung like a silver coin in a sky, thick with stars, as the entire camp gathered in the ceremonial circle. Mireya stood beside Ashen, wearing the doe-skin dress Ira had helped her make, adorned with beadwork that told her story. Fire yielding to water, storms giving way to clear sky, a bridge stretched between two shores. 3 months had passed since the night of the kiss. 3 months of joy and unrest as the camp struggled to accept its war chief's unprecedented choice. Some welcomed it, Ira foremost among them, declaring that any woman who could learn their ways without losing her own strength deserved respect. Others, led by Rook and Naira, saw betrayal in every step forward. The tension had thickened like gathering thunderclouds. Even the Apache children felt it, choosing sides in their games, dividing the camp in small but painful ways. It could not continue. Everyone knew that. Either the people would accept this union, or it would fracture them. That was when Mireya did something no one expected, least of all Ashen. She asked to speak before the council herself. Now she stood at the center of the circle, her Apache words improved but imperfect, her heart pounding, her resolve unbroken. Orson Redfeather raised his staff, and silence fell. "I stand before you as Mireya Knox," she began, her voice carrying across the gathered people. "Widow of Jonah Rook, a woman of the white world that has brought you loss and pain. I do not deny this. I cannot deny it." Murmurs rippled as she continued. "My people took your land, slaughtered your buffalo, broke treaties written in hope and shattered by greed." She paused, then lifted her chin. "I also stand before you as a woman who has lived among you, who has learned from you, who was saved by you, not only from death, but from the living death of a heart that had forgotten how to beat with purpose. You taught me that strength takes many forms, that survival is more than breathing, that family can be found where we least expect it." Her gaze moved across the circle, Loon's quiet encouragement, Ira's firm nod, Rook's hard stare, Nira's narrowed eyes, and the curious looks of children she had helped tend. "But I know my presence brings division," she said. "I know some see me as poison in the blood of the people. So I make this offer, before all." Ashen shifted beside her, startled, but she did not stop. "If the council decides I must leave, I will go. Not back to the white world that has no place for me. I will go to the spirit world, by my own choice, as I chose that night when your war chief spared me." Gasps swept the circle. "I will walk into the winter prairie and let the cold take me, as is sometimes done by those who must no longer burden the people. No blood on your hands." Ashen seized her arm. "Mireya, no." She turned to him, speaking loudly enough for all to hear. "You gave me choice once. Now I choose again. I will not be the reason this people tears itself apart. Either I remain as your woman, accepted by all, or I go to join Jonah with honor, having known what it means to live again, even briefly. The circle erupted into furious debate. A white woman offering ritual self-sacrifice for the good of the tribe shattered every assumption. It turned the ground beneath them. Rook stood, his voice cut through the noise, but instead of condemnation, uncertainty colored his words. He spoke at length, gesturing between Mireya and Ashen as Luna whispered the translation. He says he has watched you these months with anger in his heart. Luna murmured. Watched you learn, work, save children, stand beside Ashen. He waited for weakness, for betrayal. Instead, he sees a woman willing to die for the honor of the people. He says this is not the thinking of a white woman. This is the thinking of a warrior. Naira stepped forward beside him, her voice sharp with pain. Loon translated again. She says she hated you for living when her sister died in a soldier's attack. But you offered death to save the people from tearing themselves apart. The circle fell silent, the weight of Mireya's choice pressing on every heart. Some said, perhaps the spirits had purpose, even in choices that seemed strange at first. One by one, others rose to speak. The boy Mireya had pulled from the floodwaters. His mother, Eliza Crowell. Apache riders who had witnessed her courage. Apache women who had watched her learn with quiet persistence. Even those who still carried doubt could not ignore the weight of her offer. At last, the oldest grandmother of the people rose. She was so ancient that no one remembered her given name. They called her Ashen Willow, the grandmother elder, one who had lived through more seasons than anyone alive. Her voice was thin, yet it carried absolute authority. I have seen many winters, she said. Loon translated with careful reverence. I have seen tribes destroyed by fighting the white world. I have seen others destroyed by fighting themselves over how to face change. She lifted a trembling hand and pointed at Mireya. This woman offers death to prevent such destruction. But I say this. Death is the easy answer. Living is the hard answer. A hush fell over the circle. You wish to prove yourself worthy of Ashen, worthy of a place among the people. Then live. Live among those who doubt you. Live with the burden of being the bridge. Live knowing some will always see you as other. That is a sacrifice greater than death. To live when living is the hardest choice. Ashen Willow lowered herself back to the ground, and silence descended like falling snow. Orson Redfeather turned to the council elders. Their voices were low, but intense. Mireya felt Ashen's hand slip into hers, steady and warm. Whatever came, they would face it together. At last, Orson Redfeather rose and lifted his staff high. The council has heard Mireya Knox, he declared. She offered death to preserve harmony, but death serves no one. Life, he continued, a difficult life, a complicated life. A life that builds bridges, even when storms threaten. This serves the people. She will stay. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Not as captive, not as guest, but as the woman of Ashen, adopted daughter of the people. A bridge between worlds we must learn to walk. He struck his staff against the earth, the sound final. Any who cannot accept this may challenge in the proper way, or hold peace. The matter is settled. Mireya's knees nearly gave way with relief. Around her, reactions were mixed. but unmistakably changed. Her offer had shifted something deep and permanent. Rook stepped forward, Nira at his side. Mireya stiffened, but Rook extended his hand in the warrior's greeting. When he spoke, Loon translated. "I do not love this choice," he said, "but I recognize a warrior's heart when I see one. You have proven yours. I will keep the peace." Nira followed, her voice tight but steady. "A woman who offers her life for the good of the people has earned the right to live among them," she said. "I will teach you stronger beadwork. Your stitching still needs work." As they turned away, tears slid down Mireya's cheeks, the first she had shed since the night her cabin burned. These were not tears of grief. They were tears of release, of belonging. The circle slowly dissolved. Many paused to touch Mireya's shoulder or speak words of acceptance. Apache children who had once been warned away now ran toward her freely, chattering about games and lessons. The invisible wall around her was not gone. But it was no longer unbreakable. As the ceremonial fire burned low, Ashen drew her aside, away from the remaining crowd. His face held a storm of emotion, relief, pride, and a sharp edge of fear. "You did not tell me you would do this," he said. "Would you have let me?" she asked softly. "Never." His hands framed her face. "When you spoke of walking into the winter prairie, my heart stopped. To lose you now, after finding what we have found. That is why I had to offer." Mireya interrupted gently. "They needed to know I valued the people above myself. Needed to see I was not using you for protection or position. The offer was real, Ashen. If they had asked it of me, I would have gone." He pulled her into his chest, and she felt the faint tremor in him. "I know," he whispered. "That is what frightens me most." "You have learned the warrior's way too well," Ashen murmured. "To place honor above life, I learned from the finest teacher." Mireya replied softly, her voice pressed into his chest. They remained like that while the camp eased into its night rhythms. The crisis had passed, but its echoes lingered in the air. Mireya knew the road ahead would not be gentle. Cultural lines would still clash, old wounds would surface. Living between two worlds would remain a daily test. But tonight had proven something essential. She had earned her place not through Ashen's protection, but through her own choices. "Your grandmother spoke truth," Mireya said quietly. "A heart can carry two worlds if it is strong enough. Mine carries Jonah Rook and you. The woman I was, and the woman I am becoming. The white world I came from," she continued, "and the Apache world that saved me." Ashen's voice was low. "And my heart?" She lifted her gaze to him, a warrior who buried his first wife and thought his spirit died with her. A war chief called to lead his people through changing times. A man who sees in me not a replacement for what was lost, but the completion of what was meant to be. Under the vast prairie sky, stars scattered like witnesses above them, Mireya understood that the journey born of fire and desperation had led somewhere neither of them could have imagined. Not only to love, though love was there, but to purpose. To belonging, to the realization that the ending of one life can be the beginning of another. "If death waits for me," she whispered, echoing words spoken long ago. Ashen did not hesitate. The kiss that followed was not a plea but a promise. A vow shaped by everything they had endured and everything still ahead. It tasted of wood smoke and winter air, of courage and choice, of two hearts learning to beat together without silencing their own songs. Tomorrow would bring its trials. The white world still pressed inward. The buffalo were fewer each season. The freedom of the plains faced dangers love alone could not defeat. But tonight, Mireya Knox stood with her chosen people, her chosen man, her chosen life, knowing some bridges are worth building, even when the shores they connect seem impossibly distant. In the end, the kiss she once begged for had not come before death, but before life. A hard life, a beautiful life, a life demanding more courage than dying ever could. And as the winter wind sang across the prairie, Mireya Knox, becoming Mireya of the people, added her voice to its ancient song, a harmony born of loss, hope, and the endless possibility of the human heart. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Your presence means more than you know. If today's story awakened something inside you, don't let the trail end here. There are many more tales of courage, devotion, and faith waiting to be discovered. Subscribe, comment, share, and come back as we continue this unforgettable journey. Thank you, truly. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. All stories are intended solely for entertainment and may include fictionalized scenarios or dramatization derived from historical contexts. While AI assists in production, human creators supervise and adjust every piece to maintain sincerity, credibility, and emotional quality. We adhere entirely to platform regulations regarding AI content, ensuring no deepfakes or misleading portrayals. Licensed materials are used responsibly. Republishing, modifying, or extracting content without authorization is not allowed. We appreciate every viewer who respects originality and creative effort.